Let's shift gears over to Fresno State. We've also got some information and some time to speak with Cristobal, Tim DeRuiter, the defensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, Oregon's offensive coordinator, just about preparing for their week one opponent. Cristobal was very high on these guys. Tim DeRuiter was very high on Fresno State's offense. And look, when you put up 45 points a game, you're going to turn some heads. Jake Haener, their quarterback, threw for over 330 yards in the first half. Really good stuff from them week one, even though it was against UConn. This coaching staff, though, guys, was pretty complimentary of Fresno State, and in particular, their offense.
Yeah, no, Tim DeRuiter had a lot of good things to say about their offense. It starts with Jake Haener at the top, quarterback, former Washington Husky. He was lights out in the first half. I mean, he didn't play the second half. He had some cramping issues, but like Matt said, he threw for over 330 yards and had 3 touchdowns and a half, which is great, no matter who you're doing it against. I know it's UConn, but then the rushing attack with Ronnie Rivers, he's another great running back, and they have good talent for Fresno State. Jalen Cropper's another one, had Power 5 offers from the Pac-12. Yeah, this will be a legitimate offense, and I believe Tim DeRuiter is very well aware of that, and I think he's going to be preparing the defense as if they're facing a lower level Pac-12 school. I think this is a team that you can't really sleep on, and I think the coaching staff is very well aware of that.
It was pretty clear to me, based upon the answers given and the way they just kind of received the questions we asked and kind of stepped forward with them, that they're being very careful to not, and this happens this is kind of the way the staff usually works under Mario, but they're very, very complimentary, and the whole focus is on this team. And I don't want to say that they wouldn't be. Actually, I go back a couple of years. Mario was asked something about an upcoming opponent, and he basically said, I'm always going to compliment the opponent. I think this was something like circa 18 or 19. Because when I have nothing going on a Friday night, I go watch old media interviews with Mario Cristobal, because who else?
Everybody's Friday night.
That's just about as good as it gets for the Erik Skopil over here. But everything that was said was extremely flattering of Fresno State. And the truth of what this game is probably going to be is going to be somewhere probably in the middle. I don't think Fresno State's like Ohio State or Alabama. I think you're going to see a very stark difference between opponent from game 1 to 2.
Sure.
But Mario Cristobal and the staff certainly speaks about Fresno State like they're a team that's capable of not just competing with them, but of beating them. And that was why I think Mario was so quick when I asked, hey, what's the plan of the backup quarterbacks? Do you want to get some of them into games? He goes, no, we're not even thinking that way, because we're planning on winning the football game. And why, when I ask Joe Moorhead, does the fact that the defense of Fresno State shut out UConn and held them to like 100 yards, is that something that maybe catches your guys' attention? And he says, yeah, it catches our attention, but the focus doesn't change because we're already so focused on this team. So I think there's a lot of nice things being said. I think Fresno State will be a challenge. I also think you should probably read some of these quotes and not get too freaked out or scared in your britches about some things that are being said about an opponent that was picked to finish 3rd in the Mountain West, I think, North Division. So lots of positive things said. I think you can also kind of realize some of them are a little coach speak.
Ronnie Rivers, their running back, he became the program's all-time leader in career touchdowns with 45 when he scored a touchdown off a pass against UConn. Also, he became the program's all-time leader in career pass receptions by a running back. He has 118 in his career. I think that's going to be one of the big keys of this game, is whether it's Ronnie Rivers or another running back. They had like 3 running backs catch passes out of the backfield. It really feels like it's kind of what Tim DeRuiter said, was everything starts with Ronnie Rivers, and can you stop their two-way threat at that position?
I think he's almost as dynamic as a pass catcher as he is as a runner in the backfield. And I would expect against Oregon, based upon Oregon's front, and I think we think that Oregon should win at the line of scrimmage frequently, that you're going to see Rivers be most impactful out of the backfield as a receiver as opposed to as a runner. I'm not saying he's not going to like he might have break a 40 or 50-yard run. He might have a long touchdown or something. But I think overall you're going to look at the day and go, okay, Oregon kept him largely in check, but the pass catching stuff is the part where I get a little bit like, okay, that's a challenge that Oregon hasn't faced a lot in the last couple of years, is a running back who's really dynamic as a receiver. I know they've had examples of that. I know there have been some running backs in this conference that have challenged them in that way. But I think he's someone to certainly keep an eye on from that regard. And I think a lot of what Fresno State is going to do offensively is really get their guys in space. And that's where I think the athletic advantages Oregon has comes into play, and probably makes it so it's not a 45-0 Fresno State win on Saturday.
Right. Yeah, it'll be a good game. It'll be a good offense to watch. Rivers didn't have if you just go by the numbers against UConn, he didn't have a great day rushing. But then again, like half of his offensive line went out with cramping. So they weren't running their first string all game long. But yeah, he's an electric pass catcher. He's certainly a potential mismatch almost every time he lines up. And Oregon's linebackers or whoever they choose to put on him will have a hard time all day long, defending him out of the backfield and keeping him in coverage. But I think Oregon's personnel is going to be just fine for this matchup. It's significantly better than UConn. UConn's tackling was also abominable against Fresno State. Good Lord. But, it's the first game of the season for Oregon. Yep. So they have to go out there and perform as they have in practice and how we've heard that they've been doing, and, try to right their wrongs from last year.
Fresno State's defense against UConn allowed just 1.8 yards per play. It's their lowest total since 2007 when they did that against Sacramento State. They also had their first touchdown of the season came from the defensive side of the football, which is the first time since 2004 at Washington. When that happened, this defense against UConn's abysmal offense, we should note, like Jared said, forced 11 punts, 2 turnovers on downs, and a fumble in 14 total possessions. And they were led by first-year Bulldogs, Elijah Gates and Tyson Mavea for tackles, which, I think Cristobal noted they've done a really good job recruiting Pac-12 talent out of the high school ranks. And they've done a really good job of going out and landing transfer talent. And I think that was one of the biggest things that all 3 coaches mentioned is that while I think all 3 of us agree that this team is not equal to Oregon, they're better than what your typical Mountain West Conference team looks like.
Yeah, I did a story on the site, and I will do this every week, so get used to it. I'm actually going to do a series of stories called Know the Foe, which is just kind of educating the fans as best I can on some things. Monday is always going to be 5 players to know, and I put that out there today. And one of those players I mentioned was a Pac-12 transfer. Elijah Gates was a part-time starter for UCLA the last couple of years at free safety. I think led the Bruins a year ago in interceptions, former 4-star recruit, already making impacts, led the team in tackles against UConn on Saturday. He's one of 4 from the Pac-12 that are on the roster this year. Ty Jones caught a touchdown pass. He was at Washington before. Another highly regarded recruit. I think his name Evan Bennett is a defensive lineman from Oregon State. Jordan Wilmore was another big-time recruit from Utah who has transferred over and is spelling Ronnie Rivers, and I'm sure is their long-term kind of replacement for him. So it's a team that does have some talent. And then you mentioned it. Hayner's a quarterback transfer who was from Washington originally. There are multiple other players I haven't mentioned who also started out at Pac-12 schools but didn't transfer just recently. It's a team that is, again, it's not a Pac-12 level team. It's not even the best Mountain West roster, but it's certainly an above average FBS opponent. And again, like the coaches have said all week, and I think you have to be prepared and ready, because this is not UConn. I know if it was UConn, they'd be talking about UConn like they were better than they are, but this is not a bottom-feeding FBS team. This is a team that will probably be bowl eligible and pushing at least to win their division in the Mountain West.
Jared, how much stock do you put into the fact that Fresno State will have some sort of an advantage because they played a game week 0 and Oregon will not have a game under their belt coming to this one?
I put some stock into it for sure. I don't know how much I do.
Does it make this game closer in the first half than it should be?
In the first half, yeah, I think it does. I think Fresno State will just have a bit more of a rhythm coming out of the gates because they're used to it comparatively. Yeah, a full game under their system. They played as many of their ones as possible until all the cramping has happened. So it's pseudo like they played a first game, but a lot of those guys are going to be coming back and like again almost playing the second half of their first game. So it'll be an advantage for them, but I'm thinking that it'll kind of wear off after Oregon gets into a couple of drives and gets some rhythm going on offense.
Is there anything of concern for you, Erik, on that? I think it matters maybe in the first half. It might keep the score a little closer than it should, but Oregon should still pull away.
The only comment that was said today that I think stood out was not even all that, I guess, significant of one because you hear it a lot, but is something that Drew Ritter said, which is you see the biggest improvements from a team from game 1 to 2. That is what we are seeing now for Fresno State. Game 1 against UConn, game 2 against Oregon, which is, again, why you schedule a game 0 a week before you play a top 10 or a borderline top 10 team, which is what Fresno has done. So do I think it's the difference in the outcome of the game? Absolutely not. Oregon, I would be floored if Oregon doesn't win this game. Obviously, I think Oregon's going to win the game pretty handily. But, I mean, maybe it's a difference in the game being a little more competitive in general. But, like, at the end of the day, talent is talent and scheme is scheme. And it doesn't matter to me that much if some of that talent has a little bit more recent history of playing or that the scheme has been able to maybe run through some kinks in a mop-up game against UConn. I just don't take a ton away from that. And honestly, like if UConn had challenged Fresno State more and UConn was actually a good team and Fresno State had kind of had to take some lumps and kind of learn from it, that would probably concern me more. The fact that they won at 145-0, that means they probably didn't learn all that much. I mean, they learned some things that worked, but they didn't really like UConn. It's like it's totally apples and oranges, even comparing the two opponents they're playing. So it's really hard for me to think that like, hey, Fresno State beat UConn 45-0. Now they're going to go and really challenge Oregon and actually beat them or something. I just think that's a big step for me.
It's going to do it for us here on the Awesome Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the show. Make sure to subscribe to duckterritory.com. $1 for your first month. We are humming along as best we can, and it's pretty darn good, I have to say, even though we're all three biased here. A lot of people have joined up. We're at an all-time high from a subscription standpoint, so that tells you what's going on. Duck fans are going to duckterritory.com, and you want to be there with them for this 2021 football season. Until we talk to you again, you've been listening to the Awesome Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.